Well, thank you, Randy. By way of introduction, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Charlie Cullen. I'm the Technical Services Director for the Palo Alto Police Department. Technical Services Division in our department includes 911, records, crime analysis, most of the technology for the department, as well as a radio system for the city, which includes police, fire. We have our own utilities, animal control, and public works. So I rely on folks like you to keep that radio system up and running, but it falls under my division. Before I get started on the APCO ProChart presentation, I would like to talk briefly about the State 911 Advisory Board meeting we had yesterday. I know Scott attended. We had a very positive outcome on a major issue for all of us, not only on the operations side, but also for some of our commercial partners. The 911 office was looking to change the policies and procedures in a number of areas, and some of those caused a lot of concern for most of the public safety agencies and organizations in the state. I think that the collaborative effort between NAPCO, CPRA, CalNINA, the Police Chiefs Association, and the sheriffs, there was a joint letter as well as individual letters from each organization that went to the state board and some of the legislators, and that really got us the outcome that we wanted. And I think that there'll be a collaborative group that's going to be put together to take a look at the major policy changes that impact 911 throughout the state. And that working group will be made up of a representative from the Police Chiefs Association, the fire chiefs, sheriffs. There'll be 2 members from the 911 Advisory Board, as well as representatives from the state office and a representative from a small, medium, and a large PSAP. So that's a pretty good group. We're also looking at putting a commercial representative on that group to at least provide advice. I think that's a good idea, so that we come up with something that works for everybody. But that was a big achievement for public safety. I believe these changes they were looking to implement them almost immediately. I think the collaborative effort between all the organizations really put a stop to that, and we've got a much better process in place now that will benefit everybody. So my thanks to NAPCO, to Randy for the letter that he wrote, to Chuck Burdan for his participation in the conference calls we had between the organizations for really getting that done. If we hadn't gotten together, I think we'd be looking at some pretty onerous changes to the way 911 is funded throughout the state. Talk a little bit about my background with APCO. I've worked on a number of national committees, including the Telematics Committee. I was chair of the Homeland Security Committee a couple of years ago. We put out a white paper on Homeland Security and included all hazards in that white paper. I think it's still available on the APCO website. I was asked last year to join the APCO ProChart Committee, and the ProChart effort is, what we're trying to do is raise the professionalism and the standards of the dispatching discipline throughout the country. And I think California is ahead of the curve on what is going on throughout the rest of the country. We have mandated post-training. If you want to have a post-certified center, you have to send your dispatchers to post-training initially for 3 weeks, and then you have to have continued professional training of 24 hours every 2 years, and that's a good start. I think that we pay better than most states do in terms of how dispatchers are compensated. We have standards, and we do a good job of training. That's not the case throughout the country, and as you see as we get into this, we'll talk a little bit about that. Believe it or not, there's over 200,000 public safety dispatchers throughout in the United States, 6,100 public safety communication centers or PSAPs, and over 3,000 counties, 30,000 cities and towns that have PSAPs throughout the country. What do the dispatchers provide services to? Well, there's almost 19,000 law enforcement agencies, 3,000 fire and rescue agencies, and over 15,000 fire and RMS agencies out there. When you look at throughout the country, we have almost 700,000 law enforcement personnel, over 1 million fire and rescue personnel, and 840,000 EMS personnel. 200,000 dispatchers to support those first responders in the field. And 350 million people in the country. Over 260,000 911 calls are made every day, and about 240 million annually. 70% of dispatchers throughout the country are APCO members, and the ProChart mission is to provide them with the appropriate training and recognition. This is a fact that I really found astonishing, that 97% of public safety communications personnel will not work long enough to retire. Public safety communications personnel, and I think that's for a variety of reasons. That California has a pretty good retirement system. I think the numbers are probably higher here in California because people can make a career out of dispatching, and when they get to the end, they do have a good retirement, even with the revisions to the CalPERS program. And the individual retirement programs with agencies that are not CalPERS are also very good throughout the state. In the rest of the country, that may not be the case. And if you think about it, it's a job with a lot of high stress. Being able to work into your 60s as a public safety dispatcher, where you have to multitask, you have spikes in stress and very quiet times, and then a very stressful event. You can go from a barking dog to a child that's not breathing in 2 phone calls. So it is a very stressful profession to be in. You don't get the closure that the field first responders get, where you actually see what happens, what the outcome is. In a lot of cases, particularly in large agencies, you send fire and RMS out or the police, and you don't know what happened to that person who called you when they were at the, having the worst day of their life. So that's a number of the factors that I think that contribute to the short career that a lot of dispatchers have, and the fact that many of them are not able to retire from their chosen profession. In 2009, the ProChart Task Force was established to gather information and prepare reference materials for PSAPs throughout the country, and they're looking for professional recognition, certification requirements, and retirement eligibility. And they wanted APCO to be a resource for members throughout the country to directly deal with some of the issues that the dispatch profession is confronting. They want to gather and provide information, garner support throughout the country, and do a positive awareness and education program. And what do they look at when they polled all the APCO chapters throughout the state? And I think we actually have a survey that we still need to fill out here in APCO, and we're going to get to that. But they've done a good job of reaching out to every state chapter and looking at the state laws. What are the best practices? And I think California really has some best practices that could be applied to the rest of the country. What existing standards are applicable to public safety communications? What are the retirement options throughout the country for dispatchers? Professional designation. Are you considered part of the public safety community? I think the public's impression of dispatching is still it's light phones and typing, and that has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. It never really was that. But now you have a myriad of technology in the profession. When you go into most dispatch centers, you'll see there's 5, sometimes 6 screens in front of the dispatcher. They have a 911 phone system, they have computer-aided dispatch, they have a GIS mapping system, and with the influx of next generation 911, you're going to see multiple media able to connect to the 911 system, including streaming video, digital pictures, texting. Texting is on the horizon, and it has some complexity and issues that we'll need to address as a profession. It's different than a phone call. Transferring a text is probably not as easy as transferring a 911 call. So a number of things are on the horizon. That being said, I think that texting is a universal form of communication. Any of you that have kids, if you want to get in touch with them, you don't call them, you send them a text. That's how you're going to get a response. And it's accepted as a basic form of communication, and we need to respond to that in 911. And we need to be able to have protocols in place and the ability to accept texts. One of the things I think with text is that when you receive a text 911, in all likelihood, it's going to be a more critical situation. When you think about it, it's somebody who's not able to speak for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're under duress, or they're having some kind of a major issue where the only way they can communicate with a 911 system is by texting. So we need to have training in place and protocols so that dispatchers can deal with that when it comes. I know the state of California is doing a pilot project that will begin in August of this year with some select PSAPs throughout the state. So it'll be interesting to see how that transpires and what problems come up with texting, and there's a number that I can think of. We still need to embrace it and then work towards having a solution that works across the state. What they found when they polled all of the different APCO chapters throughout the country, that many states and local jurisdictions lack comprehensive training, mandated or otherwise. And there's a state that I won't mention, but this state, when dispatchers would call in at one center, they would call manpower and ask for somebody to come in and answer the phones, if you can believe that. So that state had a number of problems, some of which you've probably seen on various television programs in the past. But I think that was after some critical incidents that went wrong, they've changed that and have now imposed some training standards, et cetera. But that gives you an idea of what's going on in some other parts of the country. Certification requirements are lacking. They're not here in California, but they are still in a number of states throughout the country. As I mentioned before, I think the perception of what the profession doesn't meet the reality of what the demands are. Technology is placing more and more demands and requires more training. In the dispatch center at Palo Alto PD, it takes us 10 to 12 months to train a dispatcher. That's longer than it takes to train a police officer to be 10-8 out on the street. With all the different types of incidents they deal with and the technology and the training that they need to do the job. What did the states report? 51% have legislation requiring training, and that would include California. It's not mandated, but most agencies do it because you don't have post-certification if you don't. The average number of training hours for that required training is 32. I believe it's 3 weeks here in California, so we're a little better. It's 120 hours and then 24 hours of continued professional training. We do a lot more than that. I think most agencies do. EMD, I think, is a critical component of what dispatchers do. If you could provide that, instructions over the phone on how to do Heimlich, CPR, childbirth, most agencies do that. I don't know why you wouldn't. You're providing a high level of service to your community. If you're not doing it, that's a critical component of what we should be doing as first responders. What did ProChart come up with? And as this effort has kind of grown throughout the state, or excuse me, throughout the country, they've come up with a few sort of a manifesto of what they think should be emphasized. In training and certification, they think every state should mandate or adopt a standard criterion for 911 public safety call taking and dispatcher training. EMD protocols should be mandated by every state. I think that's a good one as well. 911 public safety communications should be paid a fair and equitable wage. And I think we kind of take it for granted here in California that it's a pretty well-paid profession, and it's something that it's still a job you can get right out of high school if you have the aptitude and the ability to do it. It's a good profession to be in, and it pays fairly well, and you do have some career path here. That's not the case in a lot of other states. The turnover is much higher in states that don't pay or compensate as well and don't have a career path for their dispatchers. The 911 fees and taxes are collected from the public, should be used exclusively in support of 911. We have a pretty good program here in California. The Setna Fund, which is the fee that you pay on your phone bill, it's 0.05% of your phone bill, so it's less than half of 1% right now. We actually think that should be raised. It provides funding every 5 years for 911 centers to replace their 911 equipment. It doesn't provide money for staffing, but it does give the capability of all the 911 centers in California to replace their equipment every 5 years. And that's critical with implementation of next generation 911, which will require a different solution from what we're using now. That fund is in a deficit now, and in a year they've been using reserves, and because of various changes in the way that the phone companies bill, a lot of people are migrating away from landline phones and everybody's using a cell phone. Everybody's kid has a cell phone, but a lot of people don't have a hardwired landline phone in their house anymore. Also, the telephone companies are bundling services, so where you used to have a separate cellular phone bill, it's now bundled with probably your cable and your internet. So less money is going into the state Setna Fund. They need to figure out a way to fund that better. The pay-as-you-go phones do not pay into this fund. There is a bill in the legislature now that hopefully will pass. There's been an argument between the manufacturers and the point of sale on where that money should be collected. I think that's been resolved, and hopefully this year we'll see that bill passed. That will help support the Setna Fund, which supports equipment throughout the state of California. But even then, they need to raise it up to 0.75, which is the maximum they can do. Otherwise, we are going to be in a deficit, and we won't be able to pay for the critical equipment that supports 911. Radio spectrum, adequate radio spectrum of all type is made available to public safety services. I think the D block, although that's designated for data, was a huge win for public safety. That was another collaborative effort that it was kind of a last minute thing with the taxpayer relief bill that they got that in there, but it's a huge benefit to to public safety in general and the implementation of FirstNet, and it seems to be moving forward. They've got some good people on the FirstNet board, and I think it's going to be a great benefit to public safety. That being said, one of the issues with the D-Block bill is that it's, in theory, in 8 years, access to T-band will go away for public safety. And that's going to be a big issue for large cities such as Chicago, Los Angeles, that are on T-band, and there is not adequate spectrum in the 700 band for them to move to now. So I think that's one that's going to continue to be debated at both the FCC and in Congress, and you may see some change in the way that law works. But certainly we need to make sure that we have adequate spectrum going forward. There'll probably be need for more. There's never a reduced need for spectrum, and certainly with all the wireless communication and broadband out there, spectrum is at a premium. Standards, this is a critical one. Training, operational, and technical standards are utilized in public safety communications. Continue to be developed in support of the profession. I think that is critical. Like any other industry, or police, fire, they have standards, even though most of them are state mandated. There's state standards and training, and that's critical to doing the job as it becomes more complex and there are more demands put on the dispatch profession. I'm not going to go into all the 2012 achievements of the ProChart group. I'm going to save some of that for the operations group this afternoon. We'll talk about how we can implement a ProChart chapter here with NAPCO, and I know that Lynn Bowler has stepped up and is going to lead that effort, and I'll be available to help get that effort started. I think it's important as we move forward. This is a profession that is critically important and really are the first responders. When you're having the worst day of your life, that's the person that you call. So I'm available to answer any questions, and I have some business cards up here. You can always contact me at Palo Alto PD. I know I'm standing in the way of lunch, so thank you for your time.